Today I'm going to talk to you about the COVID-19 pandemic and the education systems in the Caribbean. During the year 2020, around March, the education systems in the Caribbean were immensely and adversely affected by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In most cases, these effects cause severe and drastic setbacks where teaching and learning experiences were concerned. One can only think of negative setbacks and effects of this pandemic. However, as a result of this experience, I can safely say that the COVID-19 pandemic has also brought about some positive changes in regards to the education systems in the Caribbean. During this period, management and leadership skills were tested, their innovation skills were tested. There was also a test of their resilience in order to continue teaching and learning during such trying times. Also, the educational leaders, managers, and other stakeholders were forced to make necessary changes so that we can adapt to the experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic. During this time, there was increased involvement of stakeholders and support groups. There were numerous consultations with various stakeholders in order to harness ideas and innovations so that teaching and learning can continue during this time. In fact, there is a saying, the oxymoron exists, that change is one thing in life that is constant, yet it is the thing most feared. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about some changes within the education systems in the Caribbean, and it has definitely brought about some opportunities that has helped to strengthen the education systems within the Caribbean. Today, we will be looking at two of those opportunities that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought about in the education systems in the Caribbean. Now, firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought a paradigm shift from traditional to reflective teaching methods. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face learning was suspended because of the nature of the virus. Therefore, we had to resort to online or distant learning. Teachers will now have to re-strategize, revise their strategies when it comes to teaching and learning experiences. Also, when it comes to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face learning is now incorporated with online learning. So here we see a shift from constantly using face-to-face and now incorporating more ICT or information and communication technologies in teaching and learning experiences. There is also an increased inclusion of ICT in teaching and learning experiences. Now, these are some of the opportunities that were brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, today we are going to zoom in on two of those opportunities that would have helped management and leadership during the COVID-19 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please bear with me. All right. Let's go on. Now, these are some of the educational opportunities presented in the education system during the COVID-19 pandemic. Firstly, I want to look at the appreciation for science. It was stated, according to Cohen, in 2021, he said that since the COVID-19 pandemic, educational leaders, students, and other stakeholders are showing greater interest and appreciation for science. In fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, while I was doing some of my course, I can remember particularly the science and medical and technology. There were numerous assignments that were required to research the vaccines, to research and to compare the vaccines, the efficacy of the vaccines, the strands, and so on and so forth. And even among people, there were numerous debates about the efficacy of vaccines and so on and so forth. Simply meaning, what was happening is that persons, since the COVID-19 pandemic, persons are paying greater attention to science. Is the hypothesis accurate? Would this experiment turn out to be true? So we had all these analysis and all these hypotheses and all these theories, all these experiments coming out because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So people were paying greater attention to the science. So since then, since the COVID-19 pandemic, students and other stakeholders are now showing greater interest and appreciation for science. Even the anatomy of the body, people are researching it even more since the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, one can conclude that during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were more publications of scientific facts. And again, this brought me back to the first point. More attention was given to science, and as time rolls on, people were trusting and beginning to understand scientists. And as a result, there is an appreciation for science. Also, in schools, in educational institutions, there has also been increased allocation of resources in the field of science. Governments, stakeholders, and other corporate groups are now seeing the necessity or the importance of science, and therefore they are now investing heavily in science because science is the main reason for innovation. And the COVID-19 pandemic has forced or stimulated leaders and managers to be innovative. Therefore, we have seen an increase in the allocation of resources in the field of science. So this is the first opportunity that the COVID-19 pandemic has created in the education systems in the Caribbean. All right? And this is very important. Also, we see here, Cohen said that generally, since the COVID-19 pandemic, people are showing greater interest and appreciation for science than ever before in history. People are eager to understand biology and the nature of the COVID-19 virus in order to combat the spread of this infectious disease. All right? Also, as I said, there are increased allocation of resources in the field of science, right? And what Cohen further noted is that there has been extraordinary work between academic and corporate science, right? And even in the field, even in the subject area at educational institutions, there have been more collaboration, more sponsors where the field of science is concerned. We have seen an increase in science fairs. All right, so this is something positive that may. Second opportunity, educational opportunity, presented in the education system during the COVID-19 pandemic is the modernization of schools and classrooms through widespread use of technologies. Because during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were forced to use ICTs, we were forced to introduce distant learning. The post-COVID era has seen a modernization of schools and classrooms through the widespread use of technology. In other words, we have seen an increase. We have seen an increase in the use of technology in teaching and learning experiences. In the Caribbean region, especially in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have seen the distribution of tablets and other electrical devices to facilitate online learning. Now, this generation as we say, we are living in a technological era, and this generation is inclined to technology. Therefore, the use of technology in the classroom will help to enhance teaching and learning. And all of this has been brought about because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, there have been enhancement of online modules and software. So even in cases where we have gone back to face-to-face learning, some schools, some institutions are still utilizing online modules and softwares, right? In St. Vincent, we had MS Teams, right? Also, we had ICT training for educational leaders. So the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed for teachers to become trained and skilled in technology because it was the way to go during the era. Also, there was improved and increased internet access for stakeholders. The government implemented this policy so that no child or no children or no stakeholder can be left behind or may be left behind. And lastly, in some institutions, there is a continuity of online teaching, learning, and other administrative duties. For example, right now, we have a program where we are doing online registration, online record keeping, and it also allows for online assessments and reporting. And all of this has been brought about because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic, has challenged the innovation, the resilience, and adoption of management and leadership. And this has been some of the positive effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you. Stop.